Hi everybody, I'm here with Pixel, and what I'm going to be showing you the next couple of minutes is how to make my easy 10-minute panna cotta. Now, it's an easy recipe, and I'm not very picky about all the ingredients you have to use in it because there are a billion ways to do it. You can search on YouTube, you can find them online, all the various ways of doing this. So I'm going to show you my version of it, and you can easily substitute things as needed. So before we get started, I'm just going to give you a quick overview of the ingredients that we'll be using. The most important part of panna cotta is the milk or the cream. You can use 2% milk, which is what I'm going to be doing here, but you can also use whole milk, heavy cream, whipping cream, whatever suits your particular diet and your preferences, so no pickiness there. The next part is gelatin. Now, this is the part that gives the panna cotta its ability to have jello-like flake consistency or custard-like consistency. And you can use either powder or you can also use the actual paper versions of it, the sheets. And the amount you use is going to be based entirely on how much panna cotta you're going to be making. My general approximation is that for every 2 cups of panna cotta I like to make, I like to use 1 packet of the powder or 2 of the sheets, but entirely up to you on how thick or how liquidy you would like it to be. And then sugar is the other big part of how to make the actual cream part of the panna cotta itself. And so between the milk, the gelatin, and the sugar, you have the panna cotta part of the base of it covered. The last part is oftentimes a little berry compote, like a little berry filling at the very top of it. And so for that, I just picked 2 berries that are currently in our fridge right now, raspberries and blueberries, and then a little bit of lime juice to kind of add some tartness to it, and it's gonna be sugar and water as well as part of making that. And I didn't go specific in how much quantities of things you need to do, because as you're making it, keep tasting it, figure out the consistency, and we'll go from there. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I have a small cup here, or a small bowl, and I have some water filled in. And the first thing is I'm going to put some gelatin into the powder or the sheet form into it to let it start turning from like powder form or whatever default state it is into more of a gelatin mixture. So we're going to pour that in right now. And this takes about 4 or 5 minutes to fully set. So I'm just going to leave it here for a bit. Okay, now that I've added the gelatin into the water mixture, I'm going to quickly stir it to make sure that the consistency is set properly and it mixes evenly when you put it into the milk ultimately. Alright, so I'm just going to stir it very quickly, and it'll take a few moments to fully settle, which is great because we have a few minutes to spend getting the milk up to a certain temperature. So I'm at the stove right now, and what I'm going to do is just turn the heat up. The trick with panna cotta is that you want the milk to be hot, but not hot enough where it's actually boiling. And so I'm going to fill it up with, I have about 3 cups here, so it's going to be about, I'm not going to fill it up to the very top of the brink, so it'll be about 2 cups of panna cotta, 2 cups of milk essentially, is I'm going to be heating up. So in the saucer, I'm going to go ahead and pour my 2 cups of milk, and just let it cook for a bit. And it's going to be taking a few moments to fully heat up. So I'll put the milk back here, and the next thing I'm going to do is just wait a moment and start adding the sugar in as well. So for the sugar, you can use white sugar, you can use powdered sugar, you can use any kind of sugar you want. I can use brown sugar because it tastes really good. It's somewhat more on the healthier scale as sugars go. Alright, so I'm going to go and put some sugar in here. So for 2 cups of sugar, I'm not a big fan of very sweet desserts. So I like to put the amount of sugar in it because we can always add sugar or honey at the very end of it. So I'm going to just put like a couple of teaspoons in it. So for about 2 cups of milk, I like to put about 3 or maybe 4 spoons of the brown sugar. So I have 1, 2, and we'll stop with 3 right now. We can always add more as time goes on. So I'm going to go ahead and put that there. Now, there's one ingredient I didn't mention at the very beginning, but it'd be worth calling out is if you tend to have a vanilla flavor that you like in your panna cotta, a vanilla extract is a great addition to add. Some people like to put cinnamon. If you like rose syrup, you can put rose syrup. Whatever you like to add, feel free to add it in. I'll put a few drops of vanilla extract in because it is pretty handy too. Gives a nice flavor. So I'm going to put a few drops. Remember, these drops are very powerful and very strong, so you don't want to overdose it with vanilla, otherwise you just have basically a very liquidy ice cream, which is not something that you want. Alright, so now that we have this, I'm going to go ahead and start stirring it for a bit. Now, you do want to stir it, quite regularly as part of making this because you want to make sure the temperature is even throughout the pan, and you also want to make sure the sugar is also fully melted and a part of the overall mixture. So, as you're mixing it, notice that the temperature is not very, very high. Because again, the goal is to keep the panna cotta, the base of it, warm enough so that it doesn't, it's hot. So I'm continuing to stir, just keeping it, keeping the mixture continuing to flow. and make sure the temperature is fully even throughout. And one of the things you also want to make sure is that you don't want it to burn at the very bottom. Like, that creates a texture that's going to be slightly more on the acidic side, slightly bitter, so we don't want to have that. And remember, the key part about panna cotta is that you don't want the milk to boil. You want the milk to be just hot enough. And one way to do that is you can use a thermometer, you can use your finger, but one of the things I like to look for is just really small bubbles forming at the top of the mixture, because that's often a precursor to it boiling. And so when I start seeing the bubbles, that's when I turn the heat all the way down and be like, it's good to keep ready for the next step, which is really to add the gelatin mixture. So right now we're still about a minute or so away from it reaching the right temperature we want. So I'm going to keep stirring it. That's the important part. You just got to keep stirring it with the sugar and the vanilla and any other flavors that you may have added as a part of it. And remember, when I mentioned earlier, it takes about 10 minutes total to make the panna cotta. I still mean it. Right now we basically have been maybe 4 minutes total in terms of like letting the actual gelatin get more solidified in the water and getting the actual milk itself cooking. And the accumulation of ingredients. I love panna cotta because it's not a complicated dish. It doesn't require a whole set of ingredients. As long as you have milk and sugar and the gelatin powder, you pretty much have 90% of what a panna cotta needs to have. The rest of it really is just this is optional bonus material just to make yours slightly more different. So I'm continuing to stir, and right now we're getting to the point where I can start seeing some bubbles starting to form at the surface. I can see some steam coming up, and if I put my hand above the milk, I can see it getting warm, which is often a good sign that this is warm enough. It's not a precise science in the way we're doing it. Just don't let it boil, don't let it be too cold. And now it's a good temperature. So the next step, and the last step actually of making our base, is to go ahead and take the gelatin mixture that we had, that was soaking in the water, and just pour it all the way in. So I'm going to pour all the gelatin in. And the hotter, the reason we want the milk to be, slightly on the hot side is that the temperature allows the gelatin to melt really easily. So you want to basically be able to avoid any clumps as a result of it. And so I'm going to continue to stir while the temperature is still nice and warm. And the gelatin will ultimately melt and become, essentially a part of the mixture itself. So you won't see too much of it in a little bit. Alright, so I've been stirring for another minute or so. Now if we look at the actual mixture, you can see the bubbles coming up, which is like a much more visible sign that we are in a good spot, and the gelatin was already added and I've mixed it, and so we're in a good space in terms of taking what we have now and pouring it in the containers itself. So I'm going to take a quick strainer. You don't have to do this, but I like to do so just to avoid any lumps from accidentally being in there. So I'm going to take my strainer, I'm going to take my glasses, and first turn the stove off completely, and then just start pouring the mixture into each of the cups. I'm going to lay my cups here. Alright, so let me take my spoon out and put it back safely. And let's go ahead and start getting the mixture in. So it's still going to be pretty hot, and I'm going to pour it in hot as well. You don't have to wait for it to cool down. So I'm going to pour it in first. Okay. 1 cup is ready. Second cup is ready, and the third cup is ready as well. And so depending on how you measured, you may find yourself with either too little leftover mixture or too much. In my case, I have a little extra, so I'm going to get 1 more cup and just pour all of it in there just as an extra giant bonus version of panna cotta. Alright, so I brought the extra glass and I'm going to go ahead and pour it in there. So let me go ahead and dump the remaining amount into it, and very good spot. And if I look at the bowl, there's not much any gelatin there, and if you look at the strainer, there's a few pieces left, which is not bad. And this is actually great because this ensures that the gelatin has fully made its way into the actual panna cotta mixture itself. So now, while this is going on, what I'm going to do, I'm going to let this cool. I'm going to move this over to the side, let it cool for a bit. In the same container, I mentioned a big part of this is going to be the berry mixture. That's going to be the filling, make the filling that's going to be on top of our panna cotta. So I'm going to take this out and put it in the sink. And so in the same pan that we have, a small amount of milk left, it's completely okay. I'm just going to stove back on. And turn it back on. And what I'm going to do first is add a small amount of water. Doesn't have to be much, just maybe like a teaspoon or a tablespoon, just to get everything nicely coated at the very base. I'm going to take the berries that I collected from earlier. I'm going to go and pour it all the way in there. It's not going to be a lot because once the berries will cook, they start melting, you'll start getting a nice mixture. So in the hot pan, water, berries, I'm going to add a little bit of the lime juice or lemon juice, whichever one you prefer. Doesn't matter how much you add. I like to add just a few sprinkles just to give it a little bit of tartness because we will be adding some sugar to balance out the current flavor you have here. And also remember, the berries themselves have a amount of sweetness to them, so you want to balance that out also. So lastly, I'm going to go back to the sugar. In this case, I'm going to add actually 2 spoons into it. And so we now have it all cooking. And so now I'm just going to let it sit for a little bit. It's been sitting for about a minute right now. I'm going to quickly just mix it a little bit, just to make sure that we give this adequate time to cook. Now what's going to happen really is that with the heat, the sugar, the water, and the lime juice, there's going to be a little bit of caramelization that's going to happen. All the various fruits right now the berries are currently pretty solid, but in a few moments we'll start to see that they're going to start decomposing, deconstructing into more of their individual like mushy parts, and then that'll cause the entire mixture here as the water evaporates to create a nice almost jam-like consistency, which is exactly what we're going for right now. All right, let's go and take a look at the berries as they look right now. As you can see, the water has evaporated. All the various berry pieces are starting to slowly congeal into its jam-like consistency. Probably needs another minute or so to be fully done, but this is actually looking really nice. And so while this is still wrapping up, there's a few things you want to do. The first thing I want to do is cover up the panna cotta. There are 2 reasons why you want to do that. First reason is it makes the panna cotta not dry up unevenly because you don't want the top to be dry and crunchy and the bottom to be fairly soggy. So that's one reason. The second reason is that the panna cotta is a very subtle dish that doesn't have too much flavor of its own. It's very subtle in that sense. And you don't want the smells in the refrigerator to be absorbed. And so covering it up prevents all the various smells in the refrigerator from not being a part of it. All right, the panna cottas have been covered up. I used cling wrap, but you can use a small plate, whatever you have lying around. Not very particular about what the right mechanism is. Just make sure it's covered up to prevent things from drying up and the smells from entering in full speed. And now looking at our berry compote as well, just going to heat off on this. You can see that this is actually looking really good. It is a nice jam-like consistency and it's going to taste really great. Now I didn't taste what it's going to be like, but given that its berries are sweet and the amount of sugar we added is moderate and the lime is going to bring out the flavors more, I'm sure it's going to be great. And so with that, then now it's going to be the waiting part. The gelatin takes about 3 to 4 hours to set at a bare minimum, but oftentimes I have to wait about 8 or 9 hours. And so I'm going to take all of this, put it in the refrigerator, let it cool, and let the gelatin set. I'm going to take the berry compote, put it back in the bowl that we got the berries from, and put that in the fridge as well. And then we're going to wait a few hours, and then come back and finish the rest of it up. Alright, so we have all of our various panna cotta fully covered up. Here is our berry compote in a bowl. You can see it's a nice small amount, just right amount of liquid texture. I'm going to go and cover it up, and I'm going to go and put it all in the fridge and let it rest for about 6 or 7 hours in this case, but you can try to push your luck and do less if you so want. Alright, I'm going to put it in, and I'll see you guys after this couple of hours have elapsed. Alright, so we waited overnight, so about 8 hours. And right now the panna cotta is set really nicely. And one of the ultimate tests you can do if you're brave is turn it upside down and see if it falls over. It doesn't. So it has settled really, really nicely. And so I'm gonna go ahead and take off the plastic wrap. All that remains is to take the berry mixture we did yesterday and just pour it on top. All right, so we have the berry mixture. It's in the bowl as normal. And I'm just gonna go ahead and take a small amount. Just scoop it just in the middle right here. You can see that it is pretty much floating at the very top of the mixture, which is exactly what you expect because the gelatin did its job really well. I'm just gonna pour some more here. And likewise, just evenly distribute it as best as you want. Our berry compote reduced really nicely, so it's not runny at all. It's actually quite liquidy. It's actually quite solid, which is perfect because now when you're eating it, you'll get a nice combination of panna cotta and a little bit of the berries as well, which is perfect. And now what you can do is you can put the wrapper back, you can put it back in the fridge, or you can eat it right now as well, whatever you want to do. It'll hold in the fridge for a couple of days, but note that it is a milk product, so you want to eat it quickly as opposed to storing it for a long period of time. And with that, here you have it, a very simple and quick way of making panna cotta without a very strict recipe. You have a lot of wiggle room in making it entirely your own, and if you found something really cool, let me know in the comments below.